The signal traveled across the empty darkness of space for exactly 14 standard galactic cycles before it reached the conclave of unified species. Ambassador, a tall being covered in soft blue feathers, received the transmission in his private chamber aboard the diplomatic station orbiting the neutral world of Prime. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the desperate message from the Empire. They were in trouble. Their ancient enemy, the Swarm, had broken through their defensive lines. Billions of citizens faced extinction. Their military forces were scattered and weak. Their technology, once considered advanced, could not match the endless waves of warriors pouring through their borders. Called an emergency meeting of the conclave, representatives from 47 member species gathered in the great circular chamber that floated at the center of the station. Holographic displays showed the current state of the territory. Red zones covered most of their space. The Swarm had consumed 17 inhabited worlds in just 3 cycles. "We must respond," declared representative of the collective. His serpentine body coiled around his speaking platform as he addressed the assembly. "They will not stop with the. They will continue their expansion until they threaten us all." "And what forces do we send?" asked the crystalline ambassador, its voice echoing through translation devices. "Our combined fleets barely number 4,000 vessels. The Swarm fields millions of bioships. We would be throwing our people into certain death." The debate continued for hours. Species argued with species. Old grudges surfaced. Some called for isolation and defense of their own borders. Others demanded immediate action regardless of the cost. None could agree on a course of action that would actually work. It was during a brief recess that junior analyst made a discovery that would change the galaxy forever. Belonged to the species, small rodent-like beings known for their exceptional memory and attention to detail. He had been reviewing old survey reports when something caught his attention. "Ambassador," said nervously as he approached the senior diplomat, "I found something in the archives. There is a world in Sector 7G that was classified and then forgotten. The initial survey team marked it as unsuitable for contact." Looked down at the small analyst with tired eyes. "There are many unsuitable worlds in the galaxy. Why does this one matter now?" "Because of what the survey team discovered. The dominant species on this world has achieved space travel. They have nuclear capability. They have a population of over 8 billion, and most importantly, they are warriors." The ambassador's feathers fluttered with interest. "Show me." Activated his personal display device and projected the survey data. Images appeared showing a blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet had vast oceans, towering mountains, scorching deserts, and frozen poles. Weather patterns showed violent storms, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and countless other natural disasters happening constantly across its surface. The survey team classified this world as a Category 9, explained. "The gravity is 1.3 times galactic standard. The atmosphere contains toxic levels of oxygen. Radiation from the star is extreme. Predatory life forms exist in every environment. Microscopic organisms attack the bodies of larger creatures constantly. The planet itself seems designed to kill anything that lives on it." Studied the data with growing horror. And yet intelligent life evolved here. Not just evolved, ambassador, thrived. The dominant species calls themselves humans. They have survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, and countless wars against each other. They have tamed fire, split the atom, and walked on their own moon. They live in every environment their world offers, from the frozen north to the burning equator, from the depths of their oceans to the peaks of their highest mountains. More images appeared. Human cities sprawling across landscapes, human vehicles traveling on land, sea, and air, human spacecraft orbiting their planet, human soldiers carrying weapons that looked crude but effective. "Why was this world forgotten?" asked. Hesitated before answering. The survey team recommended permanent quarantine. They believed humans were too dangerous to contact, too aggressive, too unpredictable. The report said that introducing humans to the galactic community would be like releasing a plague. "And yet they have something we need," the ambassador said slowly. "They have the one thing no other species in the conclave possesses. They are built for war. They come from a world that has been trying to kill them since their species first drew breath. They might be the only beings in the galaxy who can face the swarm and survive." The decision to contact Earth was not made lightly. 3 full cycles of debate followed its discovery. Many species objected strongly. The Harmonious Unity warned that humans would turn on the Conclave after defeating the Meditation Collective argued that violence was never the answer. The Commerce Guild worried about economic disruption. But the images from space kept getting worse. Entire populations vanished overnight as bioships descended on defenseless worlds. Refugee fleets clogged the hyperspace lanes. The swarm was not slowing down. If anything, each conquered world made them stronger as they absorbed the biomass of billions of beings. In the end, desperation won out over caution. The Conclave voted to make contact with Earth. A diplomatic vessel was prepared. Ambassador volunteered to lead the mission personally. He selected a crew of the most experienced diplomats from 12 different species. They equipped their ship with translation devices, cultural databases, and enough gifts to demonstrate peaceful intentions. The journey to Earth took 6 cycles through hyperspace. Spent the time studying everything the survey team had recorded about humans. He watched their entertainment broadcasts that had been leaking into space for decades. He analyzed their history. He tried to understand their psychology. What he found disturbed him deeply. Humans had spent most of their recorded history fighting each other. They had developed weapons of such devastating power that they could render their entire planet uninhabitable. They had used these weapons on their own people. They had committed acts of cruelty against members of their own species that made feathers stand on end. But he also found something else. Buried among the records of war and destruction were stories of incredible compassion. Humans who sacrificed themselves for strangers. Communities that rebuilt after disasters. Individuals who stood against injustice even when it cost them everything. Art that celebrated love and hope and the triumph of good over evil. Humans were complicated. They were capable of both the worst and best impulses. They could destroy or create with equal passion. This made them unpredictable. This made them dangerous. But it also made them potentially the most valuable allies the galaxy had ever seen. The diplomatic vessel emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system. Ordered his crew to proceed slowly and openly. They broadcast peaceful greetings on every frequency humans were known to use. They made no aggressive moves. They simply waited to be noticed. It did not take long. Human detection systems were more sophisticated than the survey data had suggested. Within hours of their arrival, several human spacecraft had changed course to intercept them. These were not diplomatic vessels. They were warships. "Ambassador," his pilot said nervously, "those vessels are armed with nuclear weapons, chemical propulsion but surprisingly fast. They will reach us in approximately 4 hours." "Hold position," ordered. "Continue broadcasting our peaceful message. Do not activate any systems that could be interpreted as threatening." 4 hours passed with agonizing slowness. The human warships grew closer on their sensors, could see them clearly now. Ugly, functional craft built for one purpose only. They bristled with weapons. They moved in formation with obvious military precision. The lead human ship came to a stop exactly 1,000 kilometers from the diplomatic vessel, close enough to communicate easily, far enough to launch weapons if necessary. It was a position that spoke of caution and readiness, appreciated the tactical thinking. A communication channel opened. A human face appeared on their display screens, male as far as could tell, older, with hair and sharp eyes. He wore some kind of uniform decorated with metal symbols. "Unknown vessel," the human said. "This is Admiral of the United Earth Defense Force. You have entered restricted space. State your intentions immediately." Activated his own communication device. The translation system worked to convert his words into sounds humans could understand. "Admiral, I am ambassador of the Conclave of Unified Species. I come on behalf of 47 civilizations to request an audience with your leaders. We come in peace, but we bring news of great importance and great danger." There was a long pause. Admiral's expression did not change but could see activity behind him on the human ship. People moving, screens flashing, commands being issued. "You will follow my vessel to a secure location," Admiral finally said. "You will not deviate from the course we provide. You will not activate any weapons or unusual technology. Any threatening action will be met with immediate and overwhelming response. Do you understand these terms?" "We understand and accept," replied. "Thank you for your hospitality." The human admiral's mouth twitched slightly. Perhaps that was amusement, was not certain. The journey to Earth took another day at the slower speeds humans could manage. Used the time to observe everything he could about the human military escort. Their ships were crude by galactic standards but showed surprising innovation. They had clearly developed their technology independently, without access to the knowledge other species shared freely. More importantly, the humans operated with discipline and efficiency. They communicated constantly. They maintained perfect formation. They rotated crew shifts with precision. These were not amateurs playing at war. These were professionals who had trained for exactly this situation. Earth grew larger in their viewports as they approached. Even from space, could see why the survey team had classified it as a massive storm system swirled across the planet's surface. Lightning flashed in clouds that covered entire continents. The polar regions gleamed with ice while the equator showed bands of scorching heat. They were directed to orbit above a large landmass in the northern hemisphere. A shuttle was prepared to take the diplomatic team down to the surface. Selected 5 colleagues to accompany him, including whose discovery had made this mission possible. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was terrifying. The shuttle shook violently as it encountered the dense air. Heat built up on the outer hull. Winds buffeted them from every direction. By the time they touched down on a flat concrete surface, several members of the diplomatic team were struggling to maintain their composure. Stepped out of the shuttle and immediately felt the weight of Earth pressing down on him. The gravity was exactly as the survey data had promised. Walking would be difficult. Extended stays might be impossible. Yet humans lived their entire lives under this constant pressure. The air hit his respiratory system like a physical blow, so much oxygen. His body began to process it, but he knew the long-term effects could be damaging. Humans breathed this continuously. They had evolved to require it. And the noise, so much noise, wind rushing across the landing area, vehicles moving in the distance, aircraft passing overhead, communication devices chattering. Life on Earth was loud and chaotic and overwhelming. A group of humans approached the shuttle. They wore different uniforms than the military personnel had seen on the ships. These were politicians and diplomats. He recognized the signs of authority in their bearing and dress. "Welcome to Earth," said a woman at the front of the group. She was tall for a human female with dark hair and intelligent eyes. "I am Secretary General of the United Nations. On behalf of the people of Earth, we receive you in peace and with curiosity. Your message mentioned danger. We would like to understand more." Performed the traditional greeting gesture of his species. "Secretary General, thank you for receiving us. The danger I spoke of threatens not just your world but all life in the galaxy. We have come to ask for your help." The human leader's expression sharpened with interest. "Then let us talk. We have prepared a conference facility. Your needs have been considered as best we could manage. Please follow me." The conference facility was impressive by any standard. The humans had created a comfortable environment for their alien guests despite having only hours to prepare. Temperature controls, atmospheric adjustments, and gravity compensation systems showed that humanity had been thinking about meeting other species for some time. Presented the situation clearly. He showed them recordings of the swarm consuming world after world. He displayed maps of their expansion through space. He explained the desperate state of the Conclave's military capabilities. "We have come to you because you are different from other species in the galaxy," said. "You evolved on a world that would kill most forms of life. You have developed instincts for survival and combat that we cannot match. You have the population and industrial capacity to build the forces we need. In exchange, we offer full membership in the Conclave of Unified Species, access to technologies thousands of years beyond your current level, trade relationships with dozens of civilizations, a place among the stars." The human leaders listened without interruption. When finished, they looked at each other with expressions he could not read. Secretary General was the first to speak. "You want us to fight your war," she said. "It was not a question." "We want you to help us survive," replied. "And in doing so ensure your own survival. The swarm will not stop with they will not stop with the Conclave. Eventually they will come here. You can fight them later, alone and unprepared, or you can fight them now with allies and resources." "Show us everything," said a man in a military uniform. General recalled from the introductions. "Every piece of data you have on these, their biology, their tactics, their weapons, their weaknesses if you know any." The data transfer took several hours. Human analysts and military officers absorbed information at a rate that surprised. They asked questions that showed deep understanding of tactical and strategic principles. They identified patterns and possibilities that Conclave strategists had missed. "How long do we have?" General asked. "At their current rate of expansion, the swarm will consume all of space within 8 galactic cycles. Perhaps 12 cycles after that, they will reach Conclave core territories. Your world would be threatened within 20 cycles if they continue unchecked. 20 of your galactic cycles is roughly 40 of our years," Secretary General translated for the room. "Our children would face this threat. There is another factor," admitted. "The adapt. Each species they consume adds to their capabilities. If they absorb and then the Conclave, they will become far more dangerous. By the time they reach your world, they may be unstoppable." The room fell silent. Humans looked at each other with grave expressions, watched them carefully trying to gauge their reaction. Were they afraid, angry, calculating? General spoke first. "We need time to discuss this among ourselves. Your proposal has implications that affect every nation on Earth. We cannot make this decision quickly." "I understand," said. "But please understand that every cycle of delay costs lives. Worlds are dying while we talk." "We are aware," Secretary General replied, "and we will not take longer than necessary. Please rest. We will provide everything you need for your comfort. We will have an answer for you soon." The diplomatic team was shown to prepared quarters, tried to rest but found it impossible. The weight of Earth pressed down on him constantly. The sounds of human civilization never stopped, and the uncertainty of humanity's decision ate at his thoughts. What would they do? Would they refuse and condemn the galaxy to darkness? Would they accept and bring their fearsome capabilities to bear against the swarm? Or would they demand conditions the Conclave could not meet? He watched human news broadcasts while he waited. The arrival of aliens had not been kept secret. It could not be, given the number of people who had witnessed their approach and landing. The entire planet was talking about the visitors from space. Public opinion was divided. Some humans called for immediate alliance with the galactic civilization. Others demanded isolation and defense of Earth only. Religious leaders proclaimed everything from divine blessing to apocalyptic warning. Scientists expressed excitement about the technological possibilities. Politicians debated in their legislative chambers. Military commanders assessed capabilities and requirements. Ordinary citizens discussed the news with family and friends. The entire species was engaged in the decision. 3 days passed, then 4, began to worry that the humans would never reach consensus. He had underestimated the complexity of their political systems. Unlike the conclave, where appointed representatives made decisions for their species, humans required broad agreement among dozens of separate nations. On the 5th day, Secretary General requested another meeting, gathered his diplomatic team and returned to the conference facility. The room was fuller this time. Leaders from every major nation on Earth had gathered, either in person or through video connection. Ambassador, Secretary General began formally. The nations of Earth have reached a decision regarding your request for alliance. Felt his heart's beating faster. Everything depended on the next words this human spoke. We have reviewed your data on the swarm. We have assessed our own capabilities and resources. We have debated the moral implications of joining a galactic war, and we have considered the future of our species and our world. She paused. The room was absolutely silent. Earth will answer your call. We will join your fight against the swarm, but we have conditions. Relief flooded through, followed immediately by caution. What conditions? First, we will not serve under conclave command. Human forces will operate independently, with coordination but not subordination. Our commanders will make our tactical decisions. This was unusual but not unreasonable. Agreed. Second, we will have full access to all conclave technology, to be shared freely rather than rationed or controlled. We will not fight with inferior equipment while better tools exist. More difficult, some conclave species would object strongly, but desperate times required flexibility. Agreed. Third, when this war is over, Earth will have permanent representation on the Conclave Governing Council, equal voice with any other species. Our interests will be considered in all decisions. This would require restructuring the entire conclave political system, but had authority to negotiate. Agreed. Fourth and most important, Secretary General's expression hardened. The conclave classified our world and forgot about us. You left us alone in the dark, unaware of the dangers that existed beyond our sky. You decided we were too dangerous to know. That ends now. Full disclosure of everything. No more secrets. No more hidden surveys or classified reports. Humanity will never be left in ignorance again. Considered carefully before responding. The conclave's previous decisions regarding Earth were made from fear. We feared what humans might become if given access to galactic civilization. We feared your violent history and aggressive nature. Those fears led us to quarantine your world. He paused, meeting the human leader's eyes directly. Those fears were not entirely wrong. Humans are dangerous, but we now understand that your danger can be directed, channeled, used for protection rather than destruction. The conclave made a mistake in hiding from humanity. We will not make that mistake again. Then we have an agreement, Secretary General said. How quickly do you need us? General stepped forward with a data display. Based on your information about conclave technology, we have developed a preliminary timeline. 6 months to establish production facilities for advanced weapons and ships. 12 months to train initial combat forces. 18 months before we can deploy significant military capability to the combat zone. Stared at the human general. You developed this timeline in 5 days. We developed several timelines, replied calmly. This is the aggressive option. We can do it faster if lives depend on it. We are very good at building things quickly when we need to. The situation may not allow 18 months, warned. Then we will send what we can when we can. Small units first to assess the enemy and develop tactics. Larger forces as they become available. We are not waiting for perfect readiness. We are preparing to fight. Looking around the room, saw something he had not expected. The humans were not afraid. They were not reluctant. They were eager. Centuries of science fiction had prepared them for this moment. Generations of warrior tradition had shaped them for this challenge. They had been waiting to join the stars, and now they had a purpose worthy of their capabilities. The galaxy had called for help. It had reached out to a world it considered too dangerous to contact. It had asked them to save them from destruction. And the had answered yes. The journey back to Conclave space took 6 cycles. Used the time to compose his report, but nothing he wrote seemed adequate to describe what he had witnessed. How could he explain the weight of Earth to species who had never felt such gravity? How could he convey the density of human population, the intensity of their emotions, the strange mixture of violence and compassion that defined their nature? He settled for facts and data, treaty terms, production estimates, deployment timelines. The Conclave would understand numbers even if they could not understand humans. The response to his report was immediate and chaotic. Species that had warned against contact with Earth demanded explanations. Species that had supported contact demanded details. Everyone wanted to know what humans were really like. "They are unlike anything we have encountered," told the assembled conclave. "They evolved under conditions that would kill most species within hours. They have spent their entire existence struggling against a hostile world. They know nothing except challenge and conflict, but they have also developed remarkable capacity for cooperation when facing external threats. And they agreed to help us," asked the crystalline ambassador. "They agreed to fight the swarm. They see it as a challenge worthy of their capabilities. They are actually excited about the prospect of war against an enemy that threatens all life in the galaxy." Murmurs of unease rippled through the chamber. Species that had never known violence found the human attitude disturbing. Even species that maintained military forces could not understand eagerness for combat. "We have made a dangerous bargain," warned Representative. "When they are defeated, we will have given weapons and technology to a species that enjoys fighting. What will stop them from turning on us?" "Nothing," admitted, "except the same thing that stops them from destroying each other. Humans are capable of both war and peace. They choose based on circumstance. Give them an enemy to fight and they will fight. Give them friends to protect and they will protect. Our task is to ensure they see us as friends rather than enemies." The debate continued, but the reality was inescapable. The conclave had no other options. The swarm continued to advance. Space continued to shrink. Without human assistance, extinction was inevitable. And so they waited. They watched the hyperspace communication channels for news from Earth. They tracked the slow movement of forces consuming world after world. They counted the cycles until human help would arrive. 6 months passed, then 8. The government in exile sent increasingly desperate messages. More worlds fell, more billions died. The swarm grew stronger with every conquest. Then the reports began to arrive. Human ships had been detected entering conclave space, not the massive fleets that had been promised for the main offensive. These were smaller forces, scout groups and special operations teams, fast ships carrying specially trained soldiers. The first engagement came without warning. A raiding force had entered a system on the border of space, intent on consuming a small mining colony. 30,000 workers faced certain death as the bioships approached. Then human warships dropped out of hyperspace. Just 4 vessels against 20 raiders. Impossible odds by any standard calculation. The humans attacked anyway. Recordings of the battle spread across the conclave within hours. Every species watched in horrified fascination as human ships engaged with weapons that were simultaneously primitive and terrifying. Nuclear missiles detonated against bioship hulls. Kinetic projectiles tore through organic armor. Energy weapons burned flesh and bone. But most shocking was the human tactic of closing to point-blank range. While conclave doctrine emphasized standoff engagement, humans flew directly at the enemy. They accepted damage. They traded blows. They fought with a ferocity that they had never encountered. When it was over, 17 bioships had been destroyed. All 4 human vessels were damaged, some severely. Human casualties were significant, but the mining colony survived. 30,000 lives had been saved. The message spread across 100 worlds. They had arrived, and they knew how to fight. More engagements followed. Human units appeared throughout the combat zone, striking forces where they were weakest. They were not trying to stop the swarm's advance. Not yet. They were learning, testing, developing tactics that could be scaled up when the main offensive began. Ambassador received regular reports from human commanders. Their tone was professional but intense. They discussed with the same analytical approach they might use for any problem. Weaknesses were identified. Strategies were developed. Improvements were made after every battle. They have never faced an opponent willing to accept heavy casualties, wrote General in one report. Their tactics assume that enemies will retreat when threatened. When we advance instead, their coordination breaks down. They do not know how to respond to aggressive pressure. This insight proved critical. Conclave forces had always fought defensively, trying to minimize losses. Humans fought offensively, accepting losses as the price of victory. The difference in philosophy completely changed the nature of the war. 12 months after the agreement, human production facilities reached full capacity. Ships rolled off assembly lines at rates the Conclave could not believe. Weapons were manufactured by the millions. Soldiers completed training programs that condensed years of instruction into months of intensive preparation. The main offensive was approaching. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what they would do when they unleashed their full strength. And in the darkness between stars, the swarm continued to consume everything in its path, unaware that it had made a terrible mistake. It had threatened a galaxy that included humans. It had given them a reason to fight. Soon, the swarm would understand what that meant. The gathering of forces at Prime represented the largest military assembly in galactic history. Ships from every conclave species had answered the call, contributing whatever vessels and crews they could spare. But even their combined strength looked insignificant next to the human fleet that emerged from hyperspace in a continuous stream that lasted 3 full cycles. Stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic station, watching the warships take their positions. Human dreadnoughts, each one larger than anything the Conclave had ever built, formed the core of the battle line. Carriers launched constant patrols of fighter craft. Support vessels moved between the larger ships, transferring supplies and personnel. The coordination was flawless despite the chaos of movement. "How many?" asked, standing beside his ambassador. 347 capital ships, replied. 1,200 support vessels, over 4,000 fighter and bomber craft, more than 2 million soldiers and crew. "In 18 months, said quietly. They built all of this in 18 months. They did not build it from nothing. They converted existing facilities. They repurposed factories that had been making civilian goods. They trained soldiers who had been doing other work. Humans call it total mobilization. They have done it before in their own history when facing existential threats." A new ship emerged from hyperspace, larger and more impressive than the others. Its hull was covered in weapons platforms. Its engines glowed with power that seemed almost excessive. This was the flagship, the United Earth ship Defiance. General commanded the entire offensive from its bridge. "All human commanders have reported ready status," came the announcement over the station's communication system. "Final briefing will begin in 1 hour." The briefing chamber was crowded with representatives from every participating species. Conclave admirals sat beside human generals. Diplomats mixed with military planners. The atmosphere was tense with anticipation and fear. General walked to the central platform and activated the holographic display. A map of space appeared, covered in red zones marking control. Blue dots represented conclave positions. Green markers showed human deployment locations. "The situation is as follows," began. "The swarm currently controls approximately 70% of former territory. They have consumed an estimated 40 billion sentient beings. Their forces number in the hundreds of millions of individual bioships, though most of these are small attack craft rather than capital vessels." The display shifted to show fleet compositions. Massive bioships served as carriers and command nodes. Smaller vessels swarmed around them in defensive patterns. The organic nature of technology gave their fleets an unsettling appearance, like living creatures rather than machines. "Our objective is not to destroy the entire swarm," continued. "That would be impossible even with our current forces. Instead, we will target their command and coordination structure. Forces operate through a hierarchical system. Central hive minds direct regional commanders who direct local forces. Remove the central hive minds and the swarm loses coherence." A conclave admiral raised an appendage to ask a question. "We have attempted targeted strikes against command nodes before. They protect these assets heavily. Our forces could never penetrate their defenses." "Your forces attacked from standoff range," replied. "They tried to destroy the command nodes with long-range weapons while minimizing casualties. That approach allows them to concentrate their defenses. We will not be fighting that way." The display changed again to show tactical projections. Human assault forces would drive directly into formations, accepting casualties to reach the protected command nodes. Specialized ships would punch through enemy lines while the main fleet held their attention. Ground troops would board disabled bioships and fight through to their control centers. "This plan will result in significant human casualties," the conclave admiral observed. "Yes," agreed. "Current projections estimate between 15 and 30% losses among assault forces, potentially higher if unexpected complications arise." Murmurs of shock rippled through the conclave representatives. Such casualty rates were unthinkable by their standards. Wars were supposed to be clean and controlled. Losses were supposed to be minimized at all costs. "Your people accept these projections?" the admiral asked. His expression did not change. "My people understand that this war cannot be won without sacrifice. The alternative is extinction for all species in the galaxy. Given that choice, we accept the cost." The briefing continued for several more hours. Details were discussed. Contingencies were planned. Questions were answered. Throughout it all, the human commanders displayed the same calm professionalism. They knew what they were asking their soldiers to do. They knew many would not return, and they were prepared to give those orders anyway. When the briefing ended, approached General privately. The human looked tired but determined. He had been working constantly for months, preparing for this moment. "General, may I speak candidly?" asked. "Please." "The conclave representatives are concerned. They believe your casualty projections are too high. They worry that human forces will break and retreat when losses mount." Smiled slightly. It was not a happy expression. "Ambassador, do you know why humans evolved on a?" "I am not sure I understand the question." "Neither are we entirely. But one theory is that extreme environments create extreme pressures. Weak individuals die. Strong individuals survive. Over millions of years, this produces a species that is uniquely adapted to hardship and struggle." He gestured toward the viewport where human ships continued to move into position. "Every one of those soldiers understands what we are facing. They know the risks. They volunteered anyway, because humans do not give up when things become difficult. We push harder. We fight harder. We endure what other species cannot endure. And if the battle goes worse than projected, then we find a way to win anyway. That is what humans do. We find a way. The offensive began at the start of the next cycle. Human fleets accelerated toward the first target system, a former colony world that had transformed into a forward base. Intelligence indicated the presence of a regional command node, one of 12 that coordinated swarm activities across the occupied territory. Defenders detected the approaching forces and moved to intercept. Thousands of bioships swarmed toward the human fleet, ready to overwhelm the invaders with numbers. Their tactics were familiar. They had defeated every conclave force that had challenged them using exactly this approach. What happened next was not familiar at all. Instead of slowing to engage at range, the human fleet increased speed. Dreadnoughts pushed their engines beyond safe limits. Assault carriers launched their full complements of attack craft. The entire formation accelerated directly into the heart of the swarm. Casualties began immediately. Human ships took hits from organic projectiles and energy weapons. Several vessels were destroyed outright. Others suffered damage that would have caused conclave commanders to order retreat. The humans kept advancing. Energy weapons cut through bioship after bioship. Nuclear missiles detonated in the midst of formations. Kinetic rounds tore through organic hulls with brutal efficiency. The exchange rate was harsh, but the humans were trading acceptable losses for maximum damage. Then the assault carriers reached launching range. Boarding craft separated from their parent vessels and drove toward the largest ships. Each carried a complement of human soldiers in powered armor, armed with weapons designed specifically for close combat inside organic structures. They had never faced anything like this. Their defenses were designed to destroy enemy ships at range, not repel infantry boarding actions. When human soldiers breached their hulls and began fighting through organic corridors toward command centers, the bioships had no effective response. Ship after ship fell silent as human troops reached critical systems and destroyed them. With each loss, the coordination in the region became more fragmented. Units began acting independently, losing the synchronized behavior that made the swarm so effective. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, the regional command node had been destroyed. Forces in the surrounding systems fell into disarray. Human losses were within projected parameters, high by conclave standards, acceptable by human standards. News of the victory spread across the galaxy. For the first time since the war began, the swarm had been decisively defeated. They had proven that the endless tide could be stopped. More victories followed. Human forces struck target after target, destroying command nodes and fragmenting swarm coordination. Each battle was costly. Each victory was hard-won, but the momentum was undeniable. Conclave observers embedded with human units sent constant reports back to their governments. What they described was both inspiring and terrifying. Human soldiers fought with intensity that bordered on madness. They charged into situations that guaranteed casualties. They held positions long after rational beings would have retreated. They treated severe injuries as inconveniences rather than reasons to stop fighting. I watched a human sergeant continue giving orders after losing an arm to a blade, one observer reported. She applied a medical seal to the wound and kept fighting until the engagement ended. Then she walked to the medical station under her own power. A human pilot ejected from his destroyed fighter and maneuvered his escape pod to collide with a command vessel, another observer wrote. The impact did minimal damage, but it demonstrated the human willingness to sacrifice everything for even marginal gains. Humans do not seem to fear death the way other species do, a third observer concluded. They acknowledge it, they prepare for it, but they do not let it control their decisions. They fight as if death is simply another factor to be managed rather than an overwhelming concern. The conclave struggled to process these reports. How could any species produce individuals willing to accept such risks? How could any civilization sustain losses that humans considered acceptable? What kind of world created beings so comfortable with violence and sacrifice? Ambassador tried to explain. Humans evolved in constant conflict. They competed with each other for resources. They fought predators that hunted them as food. They survived disasters that would have destroyed other species. Every generation was shaped by struggle. Those who could not endure did not survive to reproduce. Those who could endure passed their strength to their children. But surely civilization softened them, argued Representative. They have not faced such conditions for thousands of years. Civilization did not replace their nature, it redirected it. Humans still compete, they still fight, they still push themselves to extremes. They simply do these things in structured ways: sports, business, exploration, and when necessary, war. The offensive continued. Month after month, human forces pushed deeper into territory. Regions that had been consumed by the swarm were liberated. Surviving populations were rescued from worlds that had not yet been completely stripped of life. These rescue operations revealed another side of human nature that surprised the conclave. Human soldiers who fought with terrifying ferocity in battle became gentle and compassionate when dealing with civilian survivors. They shared their rations with starving refugees. They carried wounded individuals who could not walk. They played with children to distract them from the horrors they had witnessed. "I do not understand," a rescued elder told a conclave journalist. "The humans killed with such violence. I saw them tear apart bioships with their bare hands when weapons failed. But when they found us hiding in the ruins, they were kind. They spoke softly. They smiled at me. How can the same beings be both things?" The journalist had no answer. Neither did anyone else who observed human behavior. They were walking contradictions. Warriors who cherished peace. Killers who saved lives. Destroyers who created hope. 8 months into the offensive, human forces reached the core territory. Intelligence had identified the location of the central hive mind, the supreme coordinating intelligence that directed the entire swarm. Destroying this target would not end them entirely, but it would shatter their unity and reduce them to isolated factions that could be dealt with individually. The central hive mind was protected by the largest concentration of forces ever observed. Millions of bioships surrounded the system. Organic defense platforms guarded every approach. The swarm knew the humans were coming and had gathered everything it could to stop them. Generals surveyed the enemy positions from the bridge of the Defiance. The holographic display showed a seemingly impenetrable wall of hostile forces. Every tactical projection indicated catastrophic losses. Some estimates suggested the human fleet would be completely destroyed before reaching the target. "Recommendations?" asked his staff. Admiral, who had been the first human to make contact with his diplomatic mission, studied the display carefully. "We could wait for reinforcements. Another 3 months would give us an additional 70 capital ships." "They would use that time to rebuild their command structure," replied. "Every node we destroyed would be replaced. We would be back where we started." "Then we attack with what we have," said, "and we accept whatever losses result." Nodded slowly. "Prepare the fleet, we go in tomorrow." That night, human soldiers across the fleet prepared for what many knew would be their final battle. They wrote messages to family and friends on Earth. They checked their weapons and equipment one last time. They said prayers to whatever deities they believed in. They faced the approaching dawn with the same grim determination their ancestors had shown facing countless challenges. Ambassador received permission to observe the battle from a shielded communication relay. He would not be close enough to see events directly, but he would receive real-time reports from embedded observers. He wanted to witness the conclusion of the mission he had helped begin. The attack commenced at first light of the local star. Human ships surged forward in a formation designed to maximize penetration rather than minimize losses. Leading elements accepted the brunt of fire to create gaps for following units. Damaged ships continued fighting until they were completely destroyed. Embedded observers reported events with increasing difficulty as communication systems were destroyed by enemy fire. Their accounts were fragmentary but vivid. Third assault wave engaging outer defense ring. Heavy casualties. Continuing advance. Boarding teams away. First contact with hive mind defensive organisms. Fighting is intense. Command ship Resolute destroyed. Admiral assumed dead. Vice Admiral taking command of 2nd Division. Ground troops reporting contact with central hive mind chamber defenses. Strongest resistance yet. Requesting additional support. Support unavailable. All reserves committed. Ground commander ordering assault regardless. Listen to the reports with growing horror and admiration. The humans were not retreating despite losses that would have caused any conclave force to collapse. They pushed forward. They found ways around obstacles. When one approach failed, they tried another. When leaders fell, subordinates took command without hesitation. Hours passed. The reports grew more fragmented. Entire units went silent. The battle had become so intense that communication was nearly impossible. Then suddenly, everything changed. The forces stopped coordinating. Bioships that had been moving in synchronized formation began drifting randomly. Weapons that had been firing with precision accuracy fell silent. The swarm was dying. Central hive mind destroyed, came a broken transmission from somewhere deep inside the enemy system. Human forces confirmed termination of primary intelligence. Repeat, target eliminated. Cheers erupted across the human fleet. Damaged ships that had been struggling to survive suddenly found themselves fighting opponents that no longer knew how to work together. Vessels began attacking each other in confusion. Defense platforms stopped firing entirely. The battle was not over. Billions of organisms still filled the system, and they remained dangerous as individuals. But the unified intelligence that had made them such an overwhelming threat was gone. The swarm had become just a collection of hostile creatures rather than a coordinated invasion force. Cleanup operations continued for weeks. Human and conclave forces systematically destroyed remaining concentrations. Surviving populations on occupied worlds were liberated. The territory that had been consumed by the swarm was slowly reclaimed. Casualty reports arrived gradually as scattered units regrouped and communicated with headquarters. Final numbers showed that human losses had exceeded even the highest projections. Nearly 40% of assault forces had been killed or wounded. Over 100 capital ships had been destroyed. More than 500,000 human soldiers would never return home. The Conclave did not know how to respond to such numbers. They had never experienced losses on that scale. They had never imagined any species accepting such costs willingly. But the humans did not seem broken by their losses. They mourned their dead with ceremonies that mixed sorrow and pride. They honored the fallen with monuments and memorials. They told stories of sacrifice and heroism that would be passed down through generations. And then they returned to their work, rebuilding and preparing for whatever challenges came next. A formal ceremony was organized on Prime to celebrate the end of the threat. Representatives from every conclave species gathered to honor the humans who had saved them. Ambassador was asked to give the opening address. He stood before the assembled dignitaries and looked out at faces representing every form of intelligent life the galaxy had produced. Many of these species had warned against contacting Earth. Many had predicted that humans would be more dangerous than many had questioned whether could be trusted. 18 cycles ago, the Conclave received a desperate plea for help, began. The swarm was consuming everything in its path. Our combined forces could not stop them. Extinction seemed inevitable. He paused, gathering his thoughts. In our desperation, we reached out to a world we had abandoned and forgotten. A world we had classified as too dangerous for contact. a world we had quarantined because we feared its inhabitants. We were right to fear them. Humans are the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever produced. They evolved on a world that would kill any of us within days. They developed instincts for violence that we cannot match. They carry within them the potential for destruction that surpasses anything we have imagined. The assembly stirred uneasily. This was not the celebratory speech they had expected. But we were also wrong, continued. We saw human capacity for violence and assumed it was all they were. We saw their weapons and their wars and their aggressive nature and concluded that they could only destroy. What we did not see was their capacity for sacrifice. We did not see their willingness to die for strangers. We did not see their determination to protect the weak and stand against injustice. We did not see the compassion that exists alongside their ferocity. Humans are not simple creatures. They cannot be reduced to a single characteristic. They are capable of terrible cruelty and remarkable kindness. They can destroy civilizations or save them. Which they do depends on how they are treated, how they are welcomed, whether they are given enemies to fight or friends to protect. He turned to gesture toward the human delegation, led by Secretary General and General. Both wore formal attire decorated with symbols of their service. We gave them an enemy, they destroyed it. Now we must give them something else. We must give them a place among us, a home in the galactic community. Friends and allies rather than fearful neighbors. If we do this, humanity will be our greatest asset. Their strength will be our strength. Their determination will be our determination. Their willingness to sacrifice will be our shield against any threat that arises. If we fail to do this, if we treat them with suspicion and fear despite everything they have done for us, then we will deserve whatever consequences follow. We will have rejected the salvation they offered and invited the destruction we feared. Looked directly at the human delegates. General's expression was unreadable. Secretary General watched with quiet intensity. I stand before you as the ambassador who first contacted humanity. I have seen their world. I have witnessed their capacity for both violence and compassion. I have watched them sacrifice themselves for species they had never met. And I tell you now, without hesitation or doubt, that the galaxy is safer with humans as our allies. They answered our call when we had abandoned them. They fought our war when we could not fight it ourselves. They paid a price that we could never have paid. The least we can do is welcome them as the equals they have proven themselves to be. The ceremony continued with speeches from other representatives. The delegation expressed their eternal gratitude to humanity for saving their species from extinction. The crystalline ambassador acknowledged that its previous concerns about human nature had been unfounded. Even Representative, who had been among the strongest voices warning against contact with Earth, admitted that his fears had been wrong. Secretary General delivered the human response. She spoke of the pride her people felt in having been trusted with such an important mission. She honored the soldiers who had given their lives and promised that their sacrifice would never be forgotten. She expressed hope that the relationship between humanity and the conclave would grow into something lasting and meaningful. When your message reached Earth, she said, many of our people were afraid. We knew nothing about the galaxy beyond our world. We had no idea whether your request was genuine or some kind of trap. We debated endlessly about the right course of action. In the end, we decided to trust you, to believe that your need was real and that we could help. We made that choice knowing the risks, knowing that we might be flying into danger that we could not even imagine. We made that choice because that is who we are. Humans do not turn away from challenges. We do not abandon those who ask for our help. We run toward problems rather than away from them. It is not always a sensible approach. It has caused us tremendous harm throughout our history, but it has also led to our greatest achievements. The galaxy called and we answered. We will always answer, because that is what humanity does. The formal treaty establishing Earth's full membership in the conclave of unified species was signed that same day. Humanity received everything Ambassador had promised and more: full access to all galactic technology, permanent representation on the Governing Council, trade relationships with every member species, complete integration into the galactic community. In return, humanity committed to defending the conclave against any future threats. Human military forces would be available to respond wherever danger arose. Human technology and expertise would be shared freely. They would become the galaxy's guardians. Reports from across the galaxy showed that public opinion toward humanity had shifted dramatically. Species that had never encountered humans directly began requesting contact. Trade vessels from Earth were welcomed at ports that had previously been closed to outsiders. Human tourists and explorers spread across the stars, eager to see everything the universe had to offer. Not everyone was comfortable with the new reality. Some species maintained their fear and suspicion despite the evidence of human heroism. They watched human expansion with concern, worrying about what would happen when the novelty wore off and humans began pursuing their own interests more aggressively. These concerns were not entirely unreasonable. Humans were still humans. They were competitive and ambitious. They pursued advantage with determination. They did not accept limitations easily. As their presence in the galaxy grew, conflicts would inevitably arise. But those conflicts would be manageable. The foundation of trust that had been built during the war would provide a basis for resolving disputes peacefully. Humans would argue and negotiate and sometimes push too hard. Other species would push back. Compromises would be reached. The galaxy would adapt. General retired from active service after the treaty signing. He had led humanity through its first interstellar war and emerged victorious. He had proven that human military capability could be directed toward worthy goals. He had earned the right to rest. Ambassador continued his diplomatic work for many years afterward. He became the galaxy's foremost expert on human culture and psychology. When other species had questions about human behavior, they came to him. When disputes arose between humans and other conclave members, he was called to mediate. He never forgot the weight of standing on Earth's surface. The pressure of that world's gravity remained with him as a reminder of what humans endured constantly. It helped him understand why they were the way they were, why they pushed so hard, why they never gave up. The junior analyst whose discovery had made everything possible eventually became the director of the conclave's archives. He spent his remaining years ensuring that no other species would be forgotten the way humanity had been forgotten. His reforms opened the classification system to greater transparency and ensured that promising civilizations would be contacted rather than quarantined. Secretary General served 2 additional terms leading Earth's unified government before retiring to write her memoirs. Her book, titled The Call and the Answer, became required reading for diplomats across the galaxy. It explained human decision-making and values in terms that other species could understand and appreciate. The relationship between humanity and the galaxy was not always smooth. There were disputes over resource allocation. There were cultural misunderstandings that escalated into diplomatic incidents. There were moments when the old fears resurfaced, and some species wondered whether they had made a mistake inviting into their community. But the alliance held. When new threats emerged, humans were there to help face them. When crises arose, human determination provided the backbone that the conclave needed. When difficult decisions had to be made, human willingness to accept hard truths cut through endless debate. The galaxy had called for help. It had reached out to a world of warriors and killers, hoping that their violence could be turned against a common enemy. It had gambled that would choose to protect rather than destroy. The gamble had paid off. Humanity had answered the call and exceeded every expectation. They had saved the galaxy and earned their place among the stars. And the galaxy was forever changed by the knowledge that somewhere, orbiting an ordinary yellow star, there existed a world where life was a constant struggle against death. A world that produced beings of incredible strength and determination. A world that had given the universe its most dangerous and most valuable inhabitants. They had called the wrong world, thinking it was too dangerous to contact. The had answered, proving that their danger could be directed toward good. And the galaxy had been amazed, watching beings who should not have survived become the saviors of all life among the stars. This was the story that would be told for, the story of how fear became trust, how enemies became allies, how the species everyone was afraid of became the protectors everyone needed. Humanity had joined the galactic community at last, and nothing would ever be the same again. Years later, a young human child asked her grandmother about the war against the old woman smiled and began to explain. The galaxy was dying, she said. Strange creatures were eating world after world. Nobody could stop them, so they called for help. They sent a message to Earth asking us to save them. Why us? The child asked. Because we are different. We come from a hard world, a world that tries to kill everything that lives on it. Other species thought we were too dangerous. They were afraid of us. Were they right to be afraid? The grandmother thought carefully before answering. Yes and no, we are dangerous. We can hurt people when we choose to, but we can also help people when we choose to. What matters is the choice. What did we choose? We chose to help. We sent our ships and our soldiers to fight the creatures that were destroying the galaxy. Many people died, but we won. We saved everyone. The child was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, were we scared? Yes, everyone was scared, but being scared is not the same as stopping. Humans do not stop just because we are scared. We keep going. We find a way. That is what makes us special. I want to be like that, the child said. I want to help people even when I am scared. The grandmother pulled her close. You already are like that. Every human is. It is who we are. It is what we do. And it is why the galaxy will always need us. Above them, through the window of their home, stars filled the night sky. Each point of light represented worlds that humans had helped save, civilizations that owed their existence to the who had answered an unexpected call. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Fear was useful for identifying danger, but it was a poor guide for making decisions. The species everyone had been afraid of had become their greatest protectors. The world they had abandoned had produced their salvation. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, other challenges were gathering. Other threats were growing. Other dangers were preparing to test the young species that had just arrived on the galactic stage. They would come. Challenges always came. That was the nature of the universe. But humanity would be ready. Humanity would always be ready. Because that was who they were. That was what they did. And that was why the galaxy would never regret calling the wrong world and watching the answer with everything they had. The story was not over. It was just beginning. And it would continue for as long as humans walked among the stars, carrying with them the strength and determination that had evolved on the harshest world in the galaxy. Earth had been quarantined because it was too dangerous. Now Earth was celebrated because that danger had become the galaxy's shield. They had arrived, and the universe would never forget what they could do.